Child labor and chocolate. Those are the two things Snickers, Hershey's Kisses, Mars bars, and M&Ms have in common.
Investigation into the dark truth behind the production of one of America's favorite treats, chocolate.
Brands you and I think we know so well, hiding their evil behind colorful packaging.
Cocoa used by candy giant Mars is harvested by impoverished children in Africa.
Children trafficked across international borders, forced to work as slave labor. Little kids as young as 5, swinging machetes twice their size. A legal and political system that lets this happen, even encourages it, while protecting the companies responsible. There's so much evidence of this slavery and exploitation, it wasn't even hard to find. The chocolate industry is full of greedy, two-faced liars, content to destroy the lives of millions of children for a profit.
There's something about one of our favorite treats you may not know.
Holy shit, it's just almost half of labor is child labor.
This is not a case of, well, maybe they needed a job. This is a case of kidnapping and slavery.
Why this is happening on West African farms is complicated, but how the industry is exploiting it is not. After hearing some of these kids' stories, you'll want to save them yourself. But this has been going on for way too long, and the obstacles standing between you and them are bigger and more complex than you could imagine.
Weigh it up.
A Mars a day helps you work, rest, and play.
3 seemingly victimless events set up West African cocoa farms to be overrun with child labor. Spread across 8 decades, it's difficult to see how they relate to each other, but you and I can look back and see the bigger picture. These events transformed the world's chocolate industry, but they sparked a battle between supply chain economics and bigger profits. Unfortunately, innocent children were caught in the crossfire and paid the real price. It all started in 1828. Today, it takes about 80 cacao beans to make 1 chocolate bar. Those beans are inside a cacao pod full of natural fats. But back then, you just waited for cacao beans to ferment and dry to get cocoa, which took ages. Then, Dutch chemist Casperus van Houten and his son Conrad came into the picture and changed everything. They thought, what if they could squeeze the fat, or cacao butter, out themselves? That question led to innovation. The father-son duo invented a hydraulic press to do just that. The leftover dust was cocoa powder, the foundation for basically every chocolate in the world. It was ingenious. Conrad took things one step further. He mixed the cocoa powder with alkaline salts so it dissolved easier. All of a sudden, cocoa was cheap and accessible. You didn't have to stand around waiting for cacao beans to dry. Cocoa powder went from a precious resource to a widely traded commodity. But there were still major kinks in the finished product. Chocolate would be misshapen and inconsistent in texture. The cacao butter in them would clump in patches. Far from the uniform, almost silky finish we're used to these days. We have Rodolphe Lindt to thank for that. In 1879, the Swiss inventor created a conching machine. It served a single purpose: to evenly distribute cacao butter across a chocolate bar. The result was incredible. The lumps and bumps disappeared. Chocolate bars became smooth and practically melted in your mouth. While the industry celebrated this invention, it cast a dark shadow over West Africa's children. Around the same time Lindt created his machine, capitalist farmers in that part of the continent were scrambling. They had made their money in palm oil, but had lost their spot in the market to Southeast Asia. These new plantations outworked them, and suddenly, their cash cow disappeared. They needed a new source of income. In 1900, at the turn of the century, they found it. The market exploded over the next couple of decades. By the mid-1930s, production had hit 300,000 tons. Most of the cocoa came from West Africa. A lot of this expansion can be traced back to the day Milton Hershey introduced America to Hershey's chocolate. That growth shaped the future of these countries. Today, 60% of the world's cocoa is harvested from Ghana and the Ivory Coast. But no chocolate brand is ever going to give you a tour of their suppliers' farms. No one wants to talk about who's actually working there.
We say more than half of all children living in agricultural areas are engaged in work. Most of them dangerous work.
West African cocoa farms adopted an ugly practice that let them meet worldwide demand. Those palm oil tycoons turned cocoa producers took advantage of people hoping to find work. A family farm wouldn't make it in the cocoa export game. They couldn't handle that scale. So when a big-time businessman said they needed people to work on their land, it made sense to take them up on the offer. Sadly, this was where the exploitation started. Farmers became sharecroppers in the 30s. What they harvested was like rent given to their employers. Croppers usually put their kids to work to make these payments, but the big man at the top wasn't technically using child labor because they employed the parent, not the kid. Technicalities like these are still around today.
One of the reasons they just pay the farmers so little. Like, farmers make less than $1 a day. Because of that, they're forced to use child labor because, they literally just don't even have money to pay someone who's not a child.
They cover up the nastiness of this business so you and I forget about the children on these farms. As disgusting as this is, the painful truth at the center of this is much worse. To understand that, you and I need to travel the messy road from cacao pod to packaged chocolate. Cacao is planted and grown. Then it's harvested, fermented, and sold to aggregators. They pool harvests from multiple farms into one big bunch. At this point, you've already lost track of who's harvesting what. Then it's sold to traders who sell to processors. These people roast the beans to develop that chocolatey flavor we all know so well. Finally, it's sold to manufacturers or directly to the brand. Now imagine if you had to track one cacao bean through this process. The moment it reaches an aggregator, it disappears in a sea of millions just like it. So how do you know if the bean used in your chocolate was harvested by an adult or a child? You don't. And maybe that's exactly how the industry wants it to be. Confusing and hard to follow. If we don't know who's harvesting the beans and still buying chocolate, we're technically supporting the industry's child labor. It's the same kind of technicality large West African cocoa farms have been exploiting for almost a century. We might not be as guilty as them, but either way, it's the kids who've been punished. This problem is more complex than child labor is bad and we should stop it. The chocolate supply chain supports massive corporations because cocoa props up West African economies. But it's not enough. In the 70s, if a chocolate bar sold for $1, 50 cents went to the farmer. Today, it's just 6 cents. Only 6% goes to the farmer. The average cocoa farmer in West Africa makes only 40% of a living income. That's barely enough to cover the necessities.
Farmers struggling, but not getting the returns that they should get from the products that they grow.
And there's an entire angle with its own agenda we haven't considered yet. That alters how we understand child labor in these countries. But it doesn't change the emotional and physical hell these kids go through every single day. The Ivory Coast could have ended child labor if it really wanted to. Coming out of a civil war that ended in 2007, the new government promised change. The children would leave the fields and return to school. But doing the right thing and politics rarely go hand in hand. Foreign currency from selling cocoa gave the nation a steady income stream, and stopping child labor would disrupt the money coming into the country. So it was the needs of the nation versus the needs of its children. Who do you think won?
Les cueillir avec joie, les détacher tendrement des arbres sans les blesser. Parce que nous faisons tout avec amour en Côte d'Ivoire.
In 2011, BBC foreign correspondent Humphrey Hawksley got the answer to that question. He spoke to Yao Kouassi, whose story was tragic and awful, but also common. When Humphrey and Yao's paths crossed, the young worker's legs were covered in scars, his eyes were sad and hopeless, and he saw nothing beyond the next cacao pod. Yao used to live with his grandmother in Bouaké, Ivory Coast's second largest city. He liked it there, but his father sent him away to the country's cocoa belt to work. 3 years had passed since that day. He hadn't seen or heard from his family since then. No new government intervened. Nobody reunited him with his family. Yao was alone and isolated, responsible for helping the nation that had abandoned him. It's unforgivable because kids like him are a part of a fragile system that runs West African countries. Humphrey Hawksley learned about that broken system when he interviewed Gilbert Kone-Kofana, the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs. If there was one man with the power and influence to end child labor in the Ivory Coast, it was Kofana. But there was something higher up in his list of priorities. You might feel like the politician is evil for prioritizing anything over child labor, and maybe he is, but nothing about this situation is in black and white. It lives in shades of gray. While speaking to Humphrey, Gilbert said that the revenue from chocolate industries helps them build roads, schools, and hospitals. It's a catch-22. Those roads are being used to traffic children like Yao Kouassi. The hospitals are cleaning the machete wounds on their legs when they get infected. What's the point of building schools when you don't have any children to put in them? It's a vicious cycle that West Africa and its children can't escape. Over 1 million planters and families are involved in Ivory Coast's cocoa business. Ghana is even worse. 6 million people are completely reliant on the cocoa market for money. How do you pull out all the children without destabilizing the countries? Remember, these people are making just 40% of a livable wage with things as they are. That number will fall off a cliff if the kids stop working tomorrow. But there are companies who can end child labor without destroying these countries' economies. They've given glimmers of hope. These are brands you know, maybe even love. That might change after what I've got to show you.
Milky Way, Snickers, Three Musketeers, Mars Toasted Almond Bar, Forever Yours, Mars Coconut Bar, and 6 kinds of Marsettes, candy cups filled with cherry or caramel or mint.
In 2001, a global chocolate brand signed a pledge promising to stop the worst forms of child labor. Their timeline? 5 years. That's a little ambitious, and after Yao Kouassi, we know things weren't better in the early 2010s. Is it possible that maybe they actually got worse? In 2019, young Abou Traore would say they did. He looked young for 19 when he was interviewed by the Washington Post, but he had the same weariness in his eyes Yao Kouassi did. Abou was fidgety, almost as if he was itching to say something but couldn't under the watchful eye of his supervisor. The moment he was alone with reporters, he scrawled something in the sand. He wasn't sure they would understand, so he carefully flashed a symbol at them using his fingers. It was the number 15. He needed the interviewers to understand that he was forced to lie about his age. When you're 19, you're legal to work, but definitely not when you're 15. It was a quiet cry for help, and it worked. Abou finally got to tell his harrowing story. Unlike Yao Kouassi, whose father sent him away to work, Traore was a victim of a lie. He was told he was being sent to school in the Ivory Coast. It was the promise of a brighter future. Instead, he was trafficked from his home country of Burkina Faso across international borders and forced to work. What kind of person lies to a kid to trick them into backbreaking labor? More importantly, what had that global chocolate brand been doing all this time? They probably had all the good intentions in the world when they signed that pledge in 2001. After all, this was Hershey's chocolate we're talking about. One of its founders' most famous quote about protecting children was, "If we had helped 100 children, it would have all been worthwhile." That was Milton Hershey. You would think that his brand would uphold those values, but their follow-through told a different story. They missed their 5-year deadline. They missed 2 more in 2008 and 2010. The worst forms of child labor they swore to erase very much existed in 2019.
They missed every deadline. It was 2005, 2008, 2010, and then I think 2020, now 2025. Every single one was missed. Partly, I don't think there is the will. I think people essentially don't seem to care. They pay lip service to it, but it never happens.
Whatever Hershey's was doing, it didn't seem to be working. Or maybe everything was going according to plan. What if Hershey's wasn't playing this game alone? The entire chocolate industry was involved, working together to halt any progress that would end child labor. Like I said at the start of this video, this evidence isn't hard to find. They just keep getting away with it because they actually have the law on their side.
U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of food giants Nestlé and Cargill, where both companies were being sued over claims that they knowingly bought cocoa beans from farms which used child slave labor.
But one man is trying to level the playing field. A lawyer based in Washington, D.C., Terry Collingsworth, has been fighting for these child laborers since the 80s. It's an uphill battle with way more losses than wins. It's impossible for Collingsworth to have the law on his side because of one stupid mistake. Well, almost impossible. A statute, nearly 250 years old, has helped him hold giant brands accountable. The world was finally waking up to the chocolate industry's evil at the turn of the millennium. Countless reports and documentaries highlighting child labor finally got federal attention. Lawyers like Terry finally had a shot at taking down Goliath. His line of work had seen him cross paths with Nestlé more times than he could count. He believed that with a swell of support from the people, he could finally make them pay. But things became way more complicated in 2001. That year might ring a bell. It's when Hershey signed a pledge to end the worst of child labor, and this is not a coincidence. This was because the feds gave them an out. Instead of taking action and saving every child working on a West African cocoa farm, that choice failed them completely. The industry was told it could accept a federal certification system. It would force brands to label their chocolate and state if child labor was involved. Or it could sign the Harkin-Engel Protocol. That handed the responsibility of ending child labor and slavery in the supply chain to the chocolate companies. To put it plainly, the feds basically forced the industry to take this problem off their hands. What do you think brands like Hershey's or Nestlé did? With the protocol signed, they could keep delaying any action using vague reasons to justify failing to meet deadlines. Big Chocolate has been given way too much sway over its own fate. The only thing standing between them and total unchecked control is the Alien Tort Statute from 1789. It's an obscure bit of legislation that lawyers like Terry Collingsworth have used to go after these massive brands. It allows non-U.S. citizens to sue American people or companies that were breaking American law on international soil. That's the only thing Terry can lean on to take these brands to court. But almost all of these lawsuits fail for a simple reason. The statute basically went unused for 2 centuries until smaller federal courts started using it, even abusing it. These courts used it as an excuse to file a lawsuit for any alleged violation of international law outside the US. So in 2004, 3 years after the chocolate industry had signed the Harkin-Engel Protocol, the Supreme Court stepped in. Not to make it easier for children like Yao or Abou to go after the chocolate industry. Instead, they narrowed the scope the statute covered. The Supreme Court restricted it to the point that almost any international lawsuit against an American company would be thrown out. Here's the proof. In 2009, a Colombian workers' union filed a lawsuit claiming Coca-Cola bottlers had paid off paramilitary forces to murder union leaders. The case got thrown out like yesterday's trash. In 2021, the Supreme Court blocked a lawsuit filed by 6 men claiming they were trafficked from Mali and forced to work in Ivory Coast. Sounds a lot like what happened to Abou Traore, doesn't it? The court reasoned that this abuse didn't happen on U.S. soil. The lawyer, Terry Collingsworth, couldn't do anything to change their minds. This told the chocolate industry that it was untouchable as long as its worst, most evil acts didn't happen on American soil.
You're saying they had no idea there was child slavery there?
Is this application domestic? Because if it's not domestic, then it's impermissible. And the aiding and abetting activity, much of it alleged was in West Africa, the paying of the money, the purchasing of the cocoa, all of the providing of the trainings.
This attitude has encouraged one brand to exploit children for more than their labor. It doesn't just enslave these kids, it teases them with a better future and then snatches it away.
Real milk chocolate, I love that Hershey bar.
Be special no matter where you are.
15-year-old Munira wanted to be a doctor, but that didn't matter. Her future had already been written by a massive American chocolate company only interested in exploiting her. Unlike Yao and Abou, who were around their early teens when they were sent to work, Munira was much younger when she started out on a cocoa farm. Kids like her were harvesting beans that would eventually end up in Snickers bars and M&Ms, both owned by Mars Incorporated. Unlike the massive farms from earlier, some of the ones in Ghana's cocoa belt are much smaller. These subsistence farms grow just enough to keep farmers and their families fed. They're also small enough to stay off the radar unless someone's looking for them. That's what CBS News did in 2023. They found children working on every farm they visited. If they'd come a decade earlier, they would have found Munira on a field with a machete at the age of 5. Nothing had changed since then. Other 5-year-olds took her place. She watched them work as her hope of becoming a doctor disappeared with each passing day. But in 2022, she believed her dream could come true. Munira was contacted by Mars field supervisors. They gave her books and a backpack to take to class. It was finally happening. Her life was about to change forever. But the school was an hour's walk away. There's no way Munira could have made that trek every day while still working on the farm. Mars wasn't worried about that because it was never about giving her an education. She was a prop, a walking PR machine and a photo op for anyone who came looking.
I feel sad. I want to be a medical doctor, but they don't have money to support me.
The company has claimed it saved thousands of children and sent them to school. The reality is different. In the 18 months that passed after Munira got her backpack, no one bothered to actually check if she was going to school. It doesn't end there. Those thousands of kids Mars has saved, most of them are made up.
Personally, I've made lists before. I've made up lists before. And I can say on authority that almost every data is scoop.
They're telling the public that we're rehabilitating this kid, and then they're cynically coming here and just checking a box, and the kid is back working the next day.
Field supervisors give the brand random names when ordered, and Mars never bothers to check if it's legitimate. They just don't care. These children don't matter to them at all. I doubt Mars even sees them as people, just cogs in a machine that mints them money. It's disgusting. No one is protecting kids like Yao Kouassi, Abou Traore, or Munira. Their governments can't decide if they want to save them or use them. The law is against anyone like Terry Collingsworth fighting for change.
Just to say that the whole enterprise is illegitimate, we're just left-wing lawyers that are trying to get in the way of international commerce.
These children are trapped in a web of lies, greed, and apathy. The chocolate industry knows it and won't fix a thing without public pressure. We came close in 2001, but the Fed screwed up, making our road ahead trickier. That chocolate bar made it to your fridge because of child labor. Sadly, that's true for your soda as well.
Everything is for real in candy bars from Mars. Why? The best candy on Earth comes from